Hello, my name is Hahnekamp. I am a trainer and consultant at Angular Architects, and in this talk I want to present you, I want to introduce you, or actually I want to persuade you to use Cypress Component Testing. And this is how we do it. I will first start a little bit with a theory, and then we will just dive into the code itself. Good. So, if we look at our common testing types that we have in Angular, we can kind of categorize them after the testing pyramid. So this means at the very bottom we have our unit tests that we write with Jest or with the combination of Karma and Jasmine, and then in the middle we have the integration and the component tests. Since the definitions of these testing types, they are not always the same, there are multiple definitions out there. I just want to give my definitions here so that we all are on the same page. So when I talk about unit tests, then I mean a test where we only test a certain TypeScript class and I mock all the dependencies of that TypeScript class. So this means when it comes to testing logic, when it comes to testing services, these kind of tests are quite useful. As soon as we go one level higher, so when we are including the DOM itself in our tests, then I would already talk about the component or integration tests. So that means we are not calling an event handler directly, we are clicking on a button, we are filling in or type something into an input field, and when it comes to asserting something, then again we are not asserting against the property of the component, but we assert against a DOM element which is rendered in the DOM. And depending on the amount of mocking that you apply. So when you mock quite a lot, then I would say this is more or less of a component test. And if you say the only thing that you mock is the HTTP communication, then I would call it integration test. But both of them have in common that we are using the DOM as the primary API or as the primary interface to our class under test, so to say. And then at the very top we have end-to-end testing with Cypress. And well, the thing is, what we quite often see and hear is that developers, they really enjoy writing end-to-end tests. There is just one problem: they are slow and we need to boot up the complete application. On the other side, writing component and especially integration tests in Jest or in Jasmine, they are very valuable, but they are very hard to write. They're extremely hard to write, and it is kind of frustrating, which shouldn't be the case because we really need to write them. And fortunately now for us, there is a possibility that we can use Cypress to write integration and component tests as well. And I mean, I have to say, there are some tools for Jest and for Jasmine to really improve the development experience. For example, the harnesses, the testing library or Spectator or even ngMox. So there are some libraries that really improve it. But compared to the Cypress component testing experience, Cypress is way superior. So we should really take a look into it. But before we do it, let's quickly summarize the advantages and the disadvantages of both approaches at the moment. So as I've said already, the end-to-end tests, well, let's start with the integration component test first. They give us the benefit that we can test our components in isolation. So I can just pick some certain parts of my applications and just test that one in isolation. With the mocking and all that stuff that I also can do, I have quite a precision about the behavior, and compared to end-to-end tests, they are quite fast. The disadvantages, and this is what actually makes it extremely hard, is first of all the setup of the test bed, especially with integration tests, that's extremely hard. Managing the asynchrony, so fake async together with tick or flush. Managing the change detection, we need to trigger them, we need to do this also all manually. And then there are some certain areas where we need to know a little bit about the DOM interaction, or where we have to deal with DOM interaction itself. By that I mean that we have to manually trigger certain DOM events. On the other side, we have the end-to-end tests where we don't have all these problems, but But yeah, we are limited in the amount of end-to-end tests because they are extremely slow. And sometimes it's also very hard because we need to set up the application. Somebody needs to be able to do this in the build pipeline, and that's not very easy. And now with Cypress Component Testing, we try to take all the advantages and kind of eliminate the disadvantages, although we can't eliminate all of them. But what we're trying to do is that we don't have to care about the asynchrony, about the change detection, and about DOM events. Still can write component tests. We still have the issue with the test bed. This is something that is necessary because it's in the test bed where we have to define what we want to mock and what we don't want to mock. And in terms of speed, since we will use Cypress for it, Cypress is a little bit slower in terms of component testing than Jest or Jasmine, but in no way, so we're not talking here about the same speed when you use the end-to-end testing version of Cypress. This is here, it is much faster. Okay, so that's it for the theory, and now let's take a look into the code itself. Alright, so this is the application that I'm going to use. It has an input field, as you can see here. I can type in there some kind of address. I click on send, then it goes to the OpenStreetMap API. It verifies that this address exists, and then it just prints out, or just shows us, not prints out, it just shows us here brochure sent. And the way how I test for this component would look like an integration test, to be precise, where I only mock the HTTP communication, is this. So we have here a before each, and you see, and as you can see here it already, there's quite a lot of configuration code necessary in order to to run my actual component. So since we are dealing here with routing information, the ID of the particular holiday is part of the route. I need to provide the service here. Then I am providing already the HTTP client with the new provider functions, and the same is true for NGRX as well. So this test also includes the complete NGRX state, at least the feature state, and yeah, that's what I would define as an integration test. So as much as possible from the dependencies are part of it, which gives me of course quite a high coverage, but yeah, it's not that easy to write. And since the request info component is already a standalone component, I only have to import it and don't need to declare it. And then we come to the actual tests. Of course, before that, we also have to generate our component fixture. We have to run the change detection, and then we have already our actual test where we are querying for the 3 DOM elements. And then you have here the common stuff. So you have here the HTTP controller where we kind of mock the communication or define the communication 2 times actually. And you also see here already the pain points. So I have already added some comments here. For example, the dispatch event, DOM events. So this is something that you have to know. If you don't dispatch here manually a DOM event, then the underlying form control is not aware that the value of the input has changed and nothing really happens. The same is true for the change detection. So we need to trigger it manually as well. We need to know the right places to do this. And well, the same is true for the asynchrony. So if we have some observables or some other asynchronous stuff, we need to run the tick, and we need to know when to run it, because otherwise again the test's not really working. And that's kind of the problem. It takes quite some time until we reach this kind of stage where we can say we have a successful test, and it can take quite some time, as I've said already, and it's quite frustrating. And this is now where Cypress steps in. In the meantime, I have already opened my Cypress screen. So we see here that Cypress asks us if we want to go with end-to-end testing or with component testing. I say I want to go with component testing, select the browser, and then the screen shows up. And then I'm ready to write my test. The testing file itself is located directly into the components folder, in the components folder next to the HTML, TypeScript file, whatever you have there. And well, I have here on the right side, I have my old test, and here I'm going to write the new one, the Cypress version of it. So As we have with any other test, we still have to come up with some kind of testbed configuration. This is something that doesn't go away, but Cypress makes it a little bit easier for us. So we have here also our before each function, and I can say I want to mount my request info component like this. The mount command internally calls the testbed, configures the testing module, does all that stuff, but also calls the initial change detection and also creates the component, of course. The second parameter of the mount is kind of more or less the same as that configure testing module, but let me first copy it. But the good thing is that Cypress understands that the request info component also needs to be imported. Obviously, if I want to render it or if I want to mount it, it needs to be imported, of course. And this is already enough for my before each. As I said before, internally the testbed configure testing module is called, and the component is now already ready. Good. And then I can start with the actual test. So I say should find an address. As we have done before, we need to have access to our DOM elements. So I'm going down, I copy them, paste them here. And as we will see, we don't need to take a look at the other file anymore, because from now on, we can just, that was not it. That's much better, this is much better, right. And we can replace the document query selector with the cyget command. That's the Cypress command to fetch something from the DOM. We don't need these type assertions anymore, so I'm going to remove them as well. And then I can already start with these 3 lines with communicating, interacting with my component. So I say here, when it comes to the input, I want to type something in. I want to type in the, how is it called? Maltekuta. I'm not sure if this is the right pronunciation, but let's leave it like this. And then, of course, I need to click on something. I need to click on the button, and then finally some request should be sent, and I actually want or can now verify that this DOM element should have the text brochure sent. Right. At the moment, of course, the HTTP communication is mocked because I'm using here the client testing module. I'm going to remove it because Cypress also provides me with the possibility to mock network requests. But now, this means, of course, that we are now hitting our real backends, but let's just try it out because theoretically it should actually work. So I go back to Cypress, I click on request info component, and we see something. This is also something new. With Jest, Jasmine, we didn't see anything, but here we can really see the actual test, and it already worked. So at the very end here, we see brochure sent, and these are the common Cypress features, which makes it so easy to write tests with. I can also go over the various testing commands. I see what has changed and all that stuff, very easy to debug. And well, of course, if it comes now to intercepting or mocking the network communication, everything that I have to do is that I just here, for example, click on it. This is the URL that was sent out. I'm going to copy it, and then back in my test, I say I want to intercept it, and I want to, for example, copy link address. And I want to return a body of, let's say, empty, because this means that now the address is not available, which means the test should actually fail. Yep. As it does, because here we have address not found. Right. And you see, we didn't have to deal with asynchrony, we didn't have to deal with DOM change detection, also not with the DOM events. That's all done by Cypress naturally, because we are running here inside of the browser. And yeah, this is what it makes really enjoyable, very productive to write component tests, integration tests. There is, of course, way more to say about component testing, but since this is just a lightning talk, I will quit at this point. Thanks, of course, for your time, and I hope I have given you some kind of motivation to try it out. Thank you very much and goodbye.